GZERO's coverage here at Spring Meetings continues. There was a major announcement this week at World Bank Group, a partnership plan to reduce the number of people living without electricity in Africa by half, essentially bringing 300 million more people into connectivity by 2030. It will take an estimated $30 billion in public sector funding, plus, of course, a substantial private sector investment. And that's why I wanted to talk to Lucy Heintz, private sector leader. She's head of energy infrastructure at Actis Energy Fund. Thanks so much for doing this.
Pleasure.
So first, it's a very big and ambitious announcement. So at face value, when you hear it, in your mind, what do you think are the first steps that are needed? What are the roadblocks here, potential obstacles? How do you begin to do this?
So I think it starts with a plan and an intention. And that's what's exciting about the announcement today. There's a very clear target and there's a clear time plan. All the tools that we need, technology-wise, business model-wise, concession-wise, exist. We've been using them for decades in other aspects of the energy system. With a clear plan and a kind of intent from government to really make this happen, then all these other things can fall into place. And so I think it really starts with, look, this is a great ambition and it's a huge plan. If it's met on the other side by a real intent to do business by government, wherever those governments may be in those countries where energy access is still lacking, then I think you can start to see the pieces fall into place.
And what is the practicality of this? Are we talking about literally building infrastructure, installing solar panels, connecting people to existing grids? Like, how does one actually implement this?
So the good news is that there are so many different options than there have been if we were doing this 10 years ago. Wind and solar are cost competitive without subsidy. You've got great natural resource endowments. You've got storage solutions with batteries. You can set up mini grids, which allow, the equivalent of being connected to a long-term, large-scale grid. You can deliver all of that to communities in modular ways, or you can build lines or extend grids to new customers. And I think the fact is that you've just got different optionality and you've got different options at different costings, which allows you to then think about what's the right solution for this community, for this location, for this region, for this distance from the grid.
And Ajay Banga has made it clear, as has the whole World Bank Group, that this is going to be a multi-stakeholder project. And obviously, private sector investment is very key to this. There's a fair amount of risk involved here. How do you approach this opportunity from the private sector? Where do you see the opportunity?
So there are many tools available for that too. So if, we work with MEGA, the political risk insurance arm of the World Bank, who will essentially, if you have a contract with government, they will insure that. And you will therefore credit wrap that revenue stream. I talked in the panel this morning about clear frameworks that establish revenue models for infrastructure projects. And once you have that within a clear framework, legislative support, a programmatic approach, and you have a kind of contractual structure with government that establishes a revenue model, you can insure that with MEGA or other providers of political risk insurance. And what you're doing is credit wrapping that stream of cash flows with AAA rated credit, which allows you then to de-risk very significantly because you're no longer just taking a single government risk. You may have a government guarantee for a period of time, but you've then put a lot of credit support around that. So many tools like that exist. We use them extensively. And again, by putting that plan together and establishing that framework, you then, and doing it on a programmatic basis, the private sector is able to build confidence, the institutions are able to build confidence, local financing providers are able to build confidence, and you crowd in over time. And so what you do today doesn't necessarily look like what you're going to do in 10 years' time. And you've seen that happen in the renewable energy industry because tariffs started off really high. And it wasn't just because of very high capex costs. It was also that there was a certain amount of risk in that too. That's come down over time dramatically. So what you've seen in the decline in tariffs in South Africa, for example, or in Egypt, is of course a big part about declines in capex, more efficient modules, more efficient wind turbines. But it's also about a risk premium that reduces with time because confidence and track record is built on all sides. And that's also really important in terms of setting a pathway which will have steps to it.
So I heard you speak this morning about this, and it was encouraging to hear that there's already a real-world example that exists, which is India. Explain that.
So India is not the only example, but it is one where you see these factors coming together in a very coherent and programmatic way. And the result of that has been just this huge amount of FDI into the energy sector. So those ingredients are the fact that the government has this absolute intent around net zero. It's got this very ambitious plan, a whole new India of wind and solar projects by 2030. India has 400 gigawatts or so of installed capacity. The target is 500 gigawatts. So that's a very big plan. India has put in place the right legislative frameworks, the right regulation. It's also invested in the enabling environment. So there's a very successful transmission grid investment program, which is led by the government, but then brings in private sector once those projects are de-risked. India is also addressing some of the challenges of intermittency around renewables by looking for power purchase agreements that deliver capacity at certain times of day. So this is not just, let's do generation. This is a proper plan with that end goal in mind. And what that's meant, because it's this programmatic approach, which is now procuring power, renewable energy at either state or federal level, literally every 6 weeks, you've got repeated activity, which is crowding people into the sector. It's bringing confidence. And as I said, the result of that is the largest infrastructure funds in the world are now all, happy investors in the Indian power sector at varying different stages of their funds and their cycles. They're all present, they're all active, and they've all come into that space in the last 10 years because of the kind of confluence of these aspects.
Many of the nations that we're talking about within sub-Saharan Africa are also the most vulnerable to climate change and environmental factors and risks. How do you bring 300 million people into connectivity without exacerbating those problems?
So I think, the very short answer is that, a reliable electricity supply is kind of fundamental if you want to have any ability to mitigate the risks of climate change, whether it's refrigeration, cooling, the ability to earn a livelihood, it's kind of fundamental. So I think, that's the most important thing to have in mind. But I think it's also really important, and a part of our investment approach is that you build partnerships over time. And those partnerships come through not just delivering renewable electricity or connecting customers, but the way you do it and the way you engage at the community and stakeholder level. So being cognizant of the impact of climate risk on your potential workforce, training your potential workforce to give them transferable skills so that they can build a livelihood within the industry, thinking about the physical impact of climate change on that infrastructure, all needs to be part of the analysis, the approach, the risk mitigation strategy and the value creation strategy.
Lucy Heintz, thanks so much. This was great.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much.